The protagonist was an ordinary student when he had an accident and was sent to another world. He entered the body of an exiled necromancer prince named Alan Alfalls. Now the protagonist struggles to rebuild the bad reputation left by the owner of the original body, but struggles with his own necromancy abilities. The story begins with someone breaking into the church. A magician yells at the archbishop to run away because that thing is coming. The archbishop asks who he is talking about, and the man asks desperately if the master has not heard of the rumors circulating on Humite Street. Who is coming is the murderer of the saints, the necromancer Alan Alfalls, also known as the Master of Demons. He has just invaded the village accompanied by his zombies. The archbishop looks at his disciple and says he has nothing to worry about. Now they have the best holy order next to them. The wizard holds his head in despair and tells the terrible news. The Knights of the Holy Order have been turned into zombies by Alan. That little demon is leading the soldiers to attack the church. At that moment Alan opens the doors of the church with magic, and the zombie knights begin to enter. The archbishop and the magician find themselves with no way out. Suddenly the glass of the doors breaks, and the whole place is taken over by corpses. The archbishop is captured by the leader of the Holy Order himself, who unfortunately could not escape Alan's black magic. The archbishop mentally asks how someone so young can use magic of this level. He cannot get rid of the zombies and realizes that this may be the end of him. But before he shouts to Alan that no matter how hard he tries, because God will grant salvation to the church, the necromancer asks if he is talking about salvation and points the barrel of the shotgun at his head, saying that he will grant him salvation. The archbishop knows that it is impossible to escape from this place. Suddenly the image of Prince Alan comes to his mind. Finally the archbishop wishes that God's blessing will take Alan to hell. A shot rang out after those words. The news of the 7th prince's attack spread throughout the city. Alan was seen as an embarrassment by his own family and to the kingdom of the Holy Emperor, so he was exiled. But not only that, people saw the 7th prince as a despicable criminal with no feelings, but he was in love with the daughter of the archbishop of the city and even declared himself to her. The girl obviously refused him. The archbishop gave him a punishment. The 7th prince did not take well the fact that he was rejected and destroyed the archbishop's house. This made the Holy Emperor go crazy and send Alan to the land of spirits, better known as the cemetery. The Holy Emperor sent him there so that he could reflect on his actions. But Alan was so shaken by being rejected by the girl he loved that he decided to end it all by putting the rope around his neck. Rumors say that he survived, and after that he became someone else. Now he works hard in the monastery without getting into trouble. People suspect this sudden change. After all, Alan was known as the prince who made a contract with the devil. Some locals claim to have seen corpses walking around the monastery since the necromancer went there, but none of this has been proven so far. The scene changes to the cemetery. Alan talks to the zombies right there, and a status window appears informing his age. He scolds the corpses for going around at night scaring the residents. It turns out that this is not the real Alan. This is our protagonist, who entered by accident into the necromancer's body when his neck was hanging by a rope. To avoid confusion, we will continue to call him Alan. Now the protagonist can see a status window that shows information about people, and even zombies. He used what he knew of necromancy to help him as guardian of the cemetery, but he was reprimanded for using dark magic. Alan didn't understand anything about the place, but over time he began to get the hang of it. Now only uses magic to make the zombies work for it, saves time and money. The protagonist even praises the work and the zombies are happy. But unfortunately he has to give the sad news that this cannot continue. The corpses start a rebellion. Alan asks for calm and explains that the reason is that he doesn't want to get into trouble. His first life wasn't easy either, and he wanted to live as long as he could like Alan. The zombies seem to understand. The protagonist decides that he will not get rid of them now and takes a shovel. The corpses raise their thumbs waiting for the order. Alan shouts that he can start the work now. The scene changes to 2 residents, and one of them hears the protagonist scream. The guy with black hair pushes a car with 2 corpses and asks his colleague to hurry. They need to get to the prince before these things turn into zombies. The residents leave the abandoned village towards the monastery. They are observed by someone who remains in the village and exudes an intense murderous aura. A few minutes later, the protagonist finds the men and asks if these are the last corpses. The black-haired resident says that they were the only ones left in that cursed village. There is no one else there. The redhead adds that all the survivors fled and the place was abandoned with the corpses, but he didn't come here just to bring the bodies. In fact, he wanted to ask Alan to go to the village. The men begin to explain that they feel safe with the prince, and maybe they can find the source of the problem. The protagonist doesn't want to accept initially because he doesn't have as many skills as the real Alan, but the guys keep begging for help. Alan doesn't feel confident. But a few minutes later he enters the village disguised and armed with a shovel. The villagers are at his side trembling with fear. Alan realizes that there are several pools created after the water supply system stopped working. Suddenly the red-haired guy asks if Alan will give him any amulet. The protagonist coldly replies no. At that moment the conversation is interrupted by a roar. They look at each other scared. The protagonist holds the shovel in his hand and says he will check the source of the noise. The guys try to convince him to come back, but Alan does not feel afraid because he felt a simple presence without a murderous aura, so small noises of rodents catch the attention of the protagonist. He approaches and thinks it's just a harmless rat, but the animal's eye turns red and in an instant he summons his group. Several rats appear and run towards the protagonist thinking of biting. Alan didn't expect to have to fight zombie rats. He starts spinning and the rats fly out of his body. The protagonist easily comes to the conclusion that this plague was the reason why the village ended up like this. The animals are hit by the shovel that exudes magic. Even without Alan summoning it, he notices that what he is doing looks cruel when he sees the bodies. So he tries to explain that it was not his intention, but the surviving rats do not want to forgive him and attack. Alan ends up falling near a pool that formed after the place was abandoned. The water was dirty and disgusting, but it becomes clean and shiny when the shovel that the protagonist carries comes into contact with the water. Alan doesn't realize why he's still arguing with the zombie rats. Suddenly the water starts to overflow and the system window appears to say that Alan is using the ability, called Death Swamp. The next moment a wave forms and begins to envelop the rats while Alan looks scared. The wave falls and wets the whole place. The protagonist wonders if he heard it. Right about the Death Swamp ability. At that moment the men come to him asking if everything is okay and telling that he found some rats. Their attention is immediately drawn to the small lake of dirty water that has now turned into holy water. Not even Alan can explain what happened, but all the zombie rats have been purified upon coming into contact with the water. He tells himself that it seems that his ability is greater than controlling zombies, although it seems strange for a necromancer to be able to purify something, but it makes sense since the body of Alan is full of holy power because he is the grandson of the Holy Emperor. The protagonist thinks that's exactly why he has holy ability. This also explains why the zombies in the cemetery were relatively kind. The protagonist's show is interrupted when he hears the roar again. This time a girl appears. The villagers recognize her as Charlotte and are happy that there is someone alive here. The black-haired one starts calling her and asks where her parents are. Suddenly Charlotte pulls out the gun she hid behind her clothes and runs at an incredible speed, quickly passing the men to reach her final prey. Alan holds the shovel in front of his face and is almost hit. The wooden handle begins to break and he pushes the girl back. The protagonist realizes that Charlotte is still not 100% zombie because of the tools she uses. The girl starts to roar and tears roll down her face. Some words escape her mouth and the protagonist hears her calling for her parents. He ends up getting distracted and again hold the next attack closely. This time Charlotte almost hits his chest. The handle of the shovel begins to shake and a blue light spreads. Alan realizes that he won't last long in this position and only finds a way out. He uses the shovel against Charlotte and then throws her into the water. She tries to get out and Alan keeps pressing her body. The girl screams and then is pushed to the bottom of the pool. The water covers her entire body and Charlotte calms down. A strong white light exudes from the girl's body and she returns to her normal state. The next day the rumors about a girl being purified spread. This disturbed the peace of the protagonist, who is now being bothered by several people who also wanted to receive the miracle. He says that the rumors are false and he is not able to save anyone. In fact, the girl who is said to have been purified has passed away. The residents ask surprised if this is true. Alan answers yes and adds that he has no holy ability. Even though he is the grandson of the Holy Emperor, the news saddens the residents who had hoped to purify the village. The protagonist asks who has been around spreading the information that he saved someone. The residents are about to answer when out of nowhere that redhead enters screaming for the protagonist. He ends up letting it slip in front of everyone that Charlotte woke up. She looks a little tired, but is physically fine. Alan realizes who leaked the information and now has no way to hide the truth from the residents. With no way to escape, he agrees to use his divine power again, but there are some conditions. The the protagonist uses the status window to find out the richest among the residents. The richest is a 75-year-old farmer who asked Alan for help even though he believed that he did not stop being that despicable prince. The protagonist knows that the farmer has money and says that his condition to purify the village is simple: the man needs to pay for the work. In addition, it is important that he repairs the cathedral for free. The farmer asks scared if he will have to fix the whole place. Alan dramatically replies that if he doesn't want it is fine, but the guy asks him to wait and agrees to his conditions. The protagonist hears this and says that he has one more thing to ask. The farmer fears that it will be more money. Alan says that what was said here should not reach the Holy Knights. He knows it would be troublesome if it reached his family or the Emperor. Everyone agrees to keep it a secret, and Alan is happy to finally be able to use this cathedral in a useful way, since no one approached it because it was considered a place of exile. After accepting the challenge of purifying the village, Alan had a conversation with the farmer and found that in the village at least 30 corpses were found that became zombies. The protagonist says that he already knows what to do and begins to take some equipment from the chest, then handed it to each of the men. The villagers didn't understand anything and the protagonist sarcastically asked if they expected him to fight alone. Suddenly the smile somber appears on his face and the villagers begin to whisper to each other that it is the devil. Alan hears this and turns towards the villagers who are silent. Suddenly someone looks out the window and shouts that the zombies are coming. Everyone runs to get the mop that would be the equipment. Alan asks them to be attentive. The zombies get closer and closer to the monastery. It seems that they followed the villagers here. The amount is much greater than what the farmer informed. Alan starts to shout that he lied. The man laughs embarrassed and says he couldn't count properly while running. The protagonist knows that there's no point in arguing now. Then he runs towards the zombies with his shovel and starts attacking them. The other villagers also fight. At that moment the protagonist's shovel comes into contact with the first zombie and a status window announces that the skill has been activated. The zombies are pierced by the holy water that comes out of the equipment. It is the second time that the protagonist uses the Death Swamp skill. He wasn't so scared because he was already used to the abilities of necromancy. This is because before the protagonist entered Alan's body, he was volunteering in a beta test of virtual reality games. In this game the protagonist chose the Necromancer class. His life ended after suffering an electric shock in the cabin. The protagonist lost consciousness, and when he opened his eyes, he was already in Alan's body. The good part is that the skills in the game have also been transferred to his new body. The bad part is that it is difficult to control his divine power due to the conflict of skills. The protagonist remembers that every time he uses a skill, his divine power simply scatters and he cannot control the force, just like now that just a touch of his equipment was able to knock down several zombies around him. At that moment the protagonist begins to hear someone screaming that he can't, it's one of the residents. He trembles on the ground saying that he knows they are zombies, but he doesn't have the courage to attack his wife. The zombie approaches and he starts crying saying that she is his beloved. The next moment she opens her mouth to devour him. The man is unable to react and is saved by the protagonist, who jumps on the woman and hits her head with the shovel. Alan angrily says that the man must understand that these people no longer have the same feelings as when they were alive. The guy tries to argue and is scolded again. Alan screams to look at the zombie. Her body is rotting and the soul has already lost its way. Letting her live is just causing greater suffering. So he screams for the man to do something. At this moment the protagonist's attention is directed to a group of zombies that appear in front of him. He easily dodges and something else catches his attention. Alan stares at something in the air. The silhouette of a person begins to fall from the sky and it lands on the ground with all its strength, destroying everything around. Charlotte stands up gracefully and asks if Alan is okay. Charlotte lived happily with her mother and father in the village. The pests usually appeared in autumn and winter, but her mother promised that this year would be different. One day Charlotte came home running. She wanted to warn her mother that there were rats everywhere in the village, but her life changed the moment she opened the door of the house. Charlotte saw her mother being attacked by a zombie. The woman's last words were for her daughter to run away while she had time. Charlotte was paralyzed and only knew how to scream for her parents. She also saw her mother turn into a zombie in front of her and try to attack her. A chase began and Charlotte had to hit her own parents. After that the girl has few memories of what happened. She remembers that she was all stained and sitting on the floor of an unknown house. After that day the people of the village became strange. The zombie rats passed by her and seemed not to see her. Charlotte understood that the plagues identified her as one of them. This made the girl very sad, and she thought she would never be saved. until he heard a noise in the village and found the protagonist. After bathing in the pool, her vision faded and came back several times. She remembers some moments where she felt that the protagonist wanted to save her. After that, her vision became dark, and when she woke up she was already out of the village. The memories of the protagonist's face were marked in her mind. The nurse told Charlotte that she was rescued by the prince, and now she would have to stay in this room until there were no more zombies outside. The girl was still not very lucid, and so she did not remember who was the prince the nurse was talking about, until she heard a scream and saw the protagonist through the window. The nurse says that this is the prince who saved her. Charlotte remembers the last words she said when she was in the village before losing consciousness and gains courage to face the zombies now. At that moment the girl jumps out of the window. That's when Alan saw her and was paralyzed. Charlotte exuded confidence and anger. The power of her punch proved it. She asked if the prince was okay. Alan was on the ground after falling with the force of the girl's punch. A few minutes later we see a pile of zombies. Alan wonders how Charlotte did it. The villagers began to praise her strength. The protagonist believes that these abilities may be a result of the purified pool, but is not sure. He then goes to the villagers and asks them to put Charlotte on the ground, then says that they needed to recognize the current situation and collect the remains of their family members. Alan clarifies that the family needs a fair burial. The residents are silent. Recognizing the harsh words, the protagonist tries to relieve the tension and says that he will also help in the cleaning ritual. The ritual is simple, just ask the deceased to go in peace, that way the spirits don't wander and finally rest. Alan performs the ritual. This is one of the reasons that the real Alan was exiled and placed in the land of spirits. There is a high chance of zombies appearing naturally. Although he has already gotten used to it, something still doesn't make sense. The protagonist realizes that lately there are many villages being damaged so quickly and all at once. He has an idea thinking about it and goes to talk to the farmer. Alan asks if there was anything strange in the village before the wave of zombies. The man replied no, the pests appeared about a month ago. Alan knows that it is normal for pests to appear at this time of year, so he assumes that this is a necromancer thing. The villagers shout asking if he thinks he is a black mage. Alan gets angry at himself for thinking out loud. He covers his ears so as not to be disturbed. In fact, this was all a theory. Alan understands that if he is right, the necromancer who controlled the zombies has to be around, but there are many residents here and it will be difficult to find that person, so the protagonist decides to rest and think about it later. He says goodbye to the villagers and returns to his room in the monastery. The boy finally lies in bed after a long tiring day. The next day the protagonist is woken up with screams. He gets up quickly and hears someone saying that a person was attacked by a zombie. Not only that, the zombies kidnapped a resident. Alan asks if this is serious and the villager replies that he saw it with his own eyes. Those damn people took the opportunity when everyone went to sleep after working all night. The guy remembers that he was very tired when he heard some screams and saw the zombie carrying Morian. The protagonist asks, confused, who Morian is, and the villager replies that he is the young woman who works with the herbs. She also helps treat injured people in the village. Alan does not seem to know the girl, but then the villager reminds him that it was Morian who rejected him. The men begin to tell how the protagonist was rejected, but he says that he already understands and they can shut up. Alan realizes that the owner of the original body has many shameful stories. At this point the villager says that a group has already been formed to pick her up. Alan realizes that these guys are very proactive when it comes to a beautiful girl, but he is also interested in finding the girl. After all, it is the first time he has seen a zombie kidnap a human, so Alan asks if anyone knows how to track her. The villager replies that in his village there is Mr. Hans. He is a hunter who knows the entire region. Alan asks to call Hans immediately and he agrees. His attention is soon drawn to Charlotte, who is standing like a mannequin. Alan approaches and she has no reaction. He assumes that the girl holds some grudge for throwing her into the pool that time. Charlotte just stays silent while the villagers run to call the hunter. A little later, the hunter Hans informs the group that the zombies have been dragging their feet, so it is easier to find their tracks. They arrive at a cave and the protagonist is sure that Morian is around here, so thanks Hans for his help. Alan was surprised by Hans' perfect perception. The cave is full of sinister demonic energy that only he can feel, but Hans was able to find the place without the help of magic. Now Alan deals with a big dilemma. The demonic energy is very strong and he fears that this place is the source of the plague. The protagonist also does not rule out the option of having a necromancer behind this story. He does not think of entering and says that it is better to just burn this place down. The villagers think it's exaggerated, but Alan explains that it's likely that the whole place is contaminated by zombies. They run the risk of becoming dinner if they enter to save that woman. The villager asks how they are going to save Morian then. Alan thinks the best alternative now is to go back and prepare properly, then he can come back, even if Morian doesn't survive in the meantime. Suddenly the conversation is interrupted by a roar that comes from inside the cave. Alan looks back, and at the same moment a bear attacks him. Red liquid splatters everywhere. The villagers look scared at the protagonist being attacked. Alan narrowly turned his face away and received a bite on the shoulder. The villagers abandoned the protagonist and ran. He was taken by the bear into the cave and then thrown off a cliff. The protagonist quickly lifts the shovel towards the bear and the death swamp skill is activated. The holy water surrounds the bear while Alan holds the arm in pain. He touches the injured shoulder and the wound is quickly healed. Alan realizes that his divine power always appears when he is reaching rock bottom. It is convenient to have an ability reversed so. The status window gives some information about the bear. His name is King of Gluttony and has a huge concentration of power in biting and crushing. In addition, his state has been enhanced by necromancy. The protagonist now understands why his holy water didn't even tickle. The bear was enhanced by necromancy, but it will be even worse that he is still being controlled by a necromancer. Alan doesn't even know where to start. The bear doesn't give him time to think and runs to attack him. The protagonist narrowly avoids him. Suddenly he sees a red light above the King of Gluttony. The next moment Charlotte jumps on the bear and presses a dagger in her eye. She has no expression on her face as the enhanced monster screams. The protagonist watches the girl and wonders if she followed him here. It doesn't matter now and Alan yells for her to get this damn thing. Charlotte gets distracted and is thrown by the bear. The King of Gluttony tries to crush her head with his paw and she dodges it. He then tries to bite, but Charlotte uses the dagger to hit him in the throat. The bear tries to close his mouth even though he is hit because he wants to snatch Charlotte's hand. She realizes this and removes the dagger from his mouth. Soon after a blue light hits the bear and he is thrown into a stone wall. Charlotte looks shocked trying to understand what happened. The protagonist approaches and thanks her for buying time until he can use his skills. The girl starts to stutter saying that she also has to thank her. She looks at the hand in front of her and when she goes to hold it she realizes that something is wrong. The girl is confused wondering if Prince Alan has turned into a zombie. At that moment the corpses begin to come out of the ground. The protagonist approaches Charlotte. A smile opens on his face when he realizes he was right. The zombies do not stop coming out of the ground. The protagonist begins to control the corpses to finish off the bear, which is quickly bitten on various parts of the body. The enhanced bear tries to react and even throws some zombies, but there are too many of them and the monster is again surrounded. The protagonist and the girl watch the scene. All these zombies were victims of the bear, and that's why Alan was able to summon them here. Now he's paying for his sins. Suddenly the bear walks up to the protagonist and gets close to his face. Charlotte acted quickly hitting his head with the dagger. The bear fell to the ground and at the same moment the protagonist began to feel weak. Charlotte asks if everything is okay and he replies that he exaggerated the divine power. She supports Alan on his shoulder because he can't walk alone. The protagonist tells the girl that today he ended up showing her all his power, but he wants to live quietly as an exile, and that's why he asks Charlotte to keep her power a secret. The protagonist seems charming from the girl's point of view. In reality the boy is feeling sick without any strength. Charlotte replies that she will help him because he is her lifeguard. Alan asks surprised why she thinks this. Conversation is interrupted by some villagers who went to rescue them. The villager approaches with a fire torch and ropes. He also brought the equipment that Alan asked to explore the cave. The villagers begin to descend through the rope. The villager soon sees the bear and excitedly asks who did it. He knows that that bear is known as lethal and the number of victims is countless. Charlotte is reluctant to answer who eliminated the bear. The protagonist quickly intervenes in the conversation and says that he thinks there is a necromancer in this cave. Charlotte seems curious. Alan says that his theory is that the necromancer tried to turn this cave into his base and destroyed the bear that already lived here. The villagers talk to each other that this theory makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, the protagonist is almost sure that that woman named Morian has already turned into a corpse too. The necromancer behind it must be well hidden. At that moment the villager asks what they should do and the protagonist says that they will continue. The guy notices Alan's health condition and asks if he is sure. The protagonist with that usual scary smile replies that he needs to see with his own eyes how good this necromancer is. The residents agree and start venturing into the cave. Silence hangs over the place. The boys walk cautiously so as not to make noise. The villager looks to the side and whispers the protagonist's name. He found Morian tied up and near her feet there are some leaves with magic symbols. The group approaches and the protagonist realizes that the girl is still alive. He doesn't understand why a necromancer would leave her alive. Suddenly an idea pops into the protagonist's head, and he is almost sure who is behind it all. Her thoughts are interrupted when Morian calls him. She looks at him with teary eyes and asks if the prince came here to save her. Alan, like a good kind gentleman, hit the girl's face with all his might. She fell to the ground coughing red liquid while the locals looked scared. Silence takes over the place. Alan said without any trace of emotion on his face that he should have hit the Morian with the sharper side of the shovel. The villagers run up to the girl and the villager asks the protagonist what's wrong. Alan was able to find out using the system window that this is not real Morian. In reality, it is a 63-year-old necromancer named Morgana. She used magic to pass herself off as Morian. At this moment the girl still in the disguise asks why the protagonist did this. He says that she should not play dumb, then informs everyone in the place that she is the necromancer. The villagers are surprised because until now they thought she was just a victim. Alan adds that her name and even her age is all lies. The girl starts screaming that she was brought here and is being taken hostage by a necromancer. The protagonist decides to play his game and says that people will only believe her if she drinks some holy water. Holy water is a poison for necromancers, but it is the best medicine for humans. The girl tries some excuses saying that this is too precious to spend like this. Alan comes close to her and orders her to drink the drink. At that moment the woman sees her whole plan being discovered. For a whole year no one in the village suspected that she was not the real Morian, so she doesn't understand how any prince can find out about it. The woman keeps thinking when the protagonist angrily asks if she won't drink. He complained about her refusing the prince's help. Suddenly that woman starts to turn into an old woman, and she says she thought about getting rid of him during the contamination. Morgana uses magic to throw the bottle of holy water away. Some hands come out of the ground while the necromancer says that she kept the protagonist alive as long as possible. But then he invaded her territory. At that moment the skeletons she summoned begin to go towards the protagonist and the villagers, but are soon hit in the head with the shovel of holy water. Alan complains that this woman is acting arrogantly as if she is important. Suddenly the necromancer Morgana feels a murderous aura coming from above and doesn't have time to react. Charlotte jumps on top of her and aims the dagger at her head. Alan thanks the girl and buries the skeletons back in the ground. Morgana angrily asks what the hell he's doing with his skeletons. Alan replies that this is what the shovels are for. Morgana yells that this is not a normal shovel. She is sure that it is a sacred relic. The protagonist advises the woman to worry about herself before thinking about the skeletons. Morgana recognizes this when she feels the dagger approaching her neck. A few minutes later the necromancer appears with some bruises on her face and her hands are handcuffed. The woman introduces herself as Morgana, a 63-year-old necromancer. The protagonist does not think it is enough and asks if she will not confess everything. Morgana replies that she does not intend to say who sent her here to finish him off. Alan is surprised and asks if she was sent by someone to send him to the coffin. Morgana says she only did it because she was asked to seduce Alan and pretend that he was the one who ended his own life. The protagonist is shocked because all this time he thought that it was the owner of the original body who did that, but looking closely it seems that he was forced to put the rope around his neck. The protagonist even regrets calling Alan pathetic. Meanwhile Morgana doesn't understand why the boy seems so calm knowing that someone is trying to finish him off. At that moment the necromancer confesses that the Dark Church sent her here to destroy the seventh grandson of the Holy Emperor, but she found out today that he is also a necromancer. Morgana adds that if the church finds out that it won't leave him alone for much longer. Alan just tells Charlotte to go ahead. The necromancer feels that blade closer and closer to her neck and screams that she's willing to tell her everything about the Dark Church. The protagonist slaps her in the face while saying that it's not worth it if she decides to tell everything so easily. Morgana falls to the ground and begins to tremble. Alan leaves Morgana's fate in the hands of the villagers, as they have lost their family members because of her. The woman begins to scream for forgiveness. The protagonist asks what they intend to do. The villager says that she should receive the same punishment for the crime she committed. This means that her fate will be very painful and cruel. The man adds that he wants to give his body to the wild animals. This should be the end of every bad necromancer. The protagonist was a little unresponsive and Charlotte approaches for behind. Deep down Alan really wanted to know about the Dark Church. At the end of that day the protagonist successfully stole the books he found from Morgana. He put them in the system's inventory and brought them straight to the room. Some books look good and Alan comments that he would like to talk to the spirits like a real necromancer, but thinks it is impossible to acquire this ability here. At this point the protagonist remembers that Morgana said she should have eliminated him during the murder spree. He fears that his brothers are behind it. It makes sense that they would try something like this because of the battle for succession. It is the first time that the protagonist witnesses a fight for the throne, but he soon understands that he will have to get used to it because in this new life, he is a member of the royal family. This causes a concern in the boy, and he thinks that maybe it would be better to hire some mercenaries to take care of his safety. While the protagonist thinks, Charlotte sits silently on one of the benches. She notices the prince's concern and also fears that he will be murdered by his own brothers. Charlotte knows that people used to think Alan was a despicable guy, but she saw with her own eyes that he changed and saved many people alone, especially in this incident. He even held funerals for those who passed away. Charlotte also remembers that Alan took care of the corpses of her parents. This made the girl even more emotional, and she recognized the protagonist as her only savior. Charlotte thought of a way to thank her and came to the conclusion that for now the best thing to do is just follow him, to make sure nothing will happen to him. At that moment Charlotte notices a book on the table called Imperial Swordsman's Guide. She is sure it is a thing of fate. So she takes the book and says she is willing to become even stronger to protect the prince. Meanwhile Alan is focused on describing in the window how was yesterday. Then he goes back to reading the books he managed to steal from Morgana. One of them is about the evolution of zombies. The zombies' bodies decompose and they become skeletons. If they manage to keep their bodies intact, they evolve into their most powerful versions. From a ghost to a Dullahan, from a Dullahan to a vampire. Evolutions consequently make them smarter and more powerful. The book also explains that zombies need mana to evolve faster. Their destination is called the Land of Spirits, but before getting there, they will have to go to the land that is darker and colder, so the body does not deteriorate with the heat. When winter arrives is the best period for these zombies to find the Land of Spirits. The book also says that December 25th is marked as the day of the murder wave, as it was the day that the king of zombies named Amon was murdered. It is on this day that the largest number of zombies seek the Land of Spirits to recover their lives. The protagonist realizes that there are only a few days left for the murder wave. The Necromancer talked about destroying him in that period. Fortunately she was attacked before and now the protagonist knows what the plan is. Suddenly Charlotte takes him out of her thoughts and asks permission to keep the book. He agrees and hands it over. The girl walks away and the protagonist notes that Charlotte comes to church every day, even without him asking. She cleans the cemeteries and even prepares meals without receiving any remuneration. The protagonist thinks the girl will leave. When he feels he thanked her enough, in addition she was adopted by Grill and now has a house to return to, Alan is happy that everything went well. Suddenly the door of the church opens with a loud noise. At the door some knights appear. Alan is frightened by the unexpected visit and asks what happened. He uses the system and discovers that these men are Knights of the Holy Cross. The deputy commander named Harmon Dien takes off his helmet and tells the protagonist that he heard rumors about him having captured the witch Morgana. Alan realizes that the man broke into the church without even greeting him. It seems that no one has respecting an exiled prince. After seeing the knights, the protagonist concluded that they must be the damned ones that Morgana said were keeping an eye on him. So Alan is direct and confesses that he caught the necromancer along with the villagers. Harmon says he just wanted to confirm if it was true and asks if it took a lot of effort. Alan replies yes. After the deputy commander questions if they defeated the bear with farming tools, the protagonist is silent. Harmon also says that he knows that they defeated the bear while a person named Grill destroyed 30 walkers and cornered the witch with holy water. The deputy commander explains that this is what the villager said. The protagonist feels like finishing off Grill after this conversation. Harmon confesses that he thought all this was an exaggeration told by Grill, but believed it when he saw the traces of the battle. Alan knows that the deputy commander as a knight has seen worse things. Harmon agrees and asks if he knew that Morgana belonged to the Dark Church. The protagonist confirms that he heard this from her and initially thought it was some kind of secret, but it seems that it is a public fact. Harmon tells that so far that woman has destroyed 5 villages by herself. Alan is surprised because he didn't think she was so strong. The deputy commander seriously asks if he eliminated that witch. The protagonist confirms that Morgana was beaten and her body was thrown away. Harmon asks if he was the one who did it. Alan questions if the man really thinks he is so strong. The protagonist preferred to continue Grill's bluff because in the end it is not worth revealing that he was the one who subdued the witch. To convey more truth, he said that he was so scared that he almost wet his pants. Charlotte held the boy while he did his theater. The knights were disgusted to hear this, but Harmon soon remembers what he came here to do and asks where the books are. Alan plays dumb and asks what he is talking about. The deputy commander explains that he was sent to retrieve the books on black magic from the witch Morgana, but for some reason her bookshelf was empty. The culprit looks as if he had nothing to do with the situation. He laughs and says he believes the villagers burned because they were very dangerous. The deputy commander thanks him for answering the questions and says he will talk to the villagers, but first he gives Alan a bag with 80 gold coins. This is the bounty on Morgana's head. The protagonist says with a smile on his face that he only did what he had to do. Harmon asks him to share it with the other villagers and he agrees. Then he leaves kissing the bag with the coins. Suddenly the deputy commander asks the protagonist to pack his things. The boy looks incredulous, asking if he will be exiled for the second time. Harmon reassures him by saying that he actually just wants to get him out of the land of spirits because it's almost time for the murder spree, so they're going to escort him out of here. Alan is shocked because he didn't expect anyone to still care about him. The boy excitedly asks if he's going back to the royal palace, but gets a negative answer. The destination will be the Lonia property. The protagonist comments that that place is still in the land of the spirits, so he thinks it makes no sense to evacuate. The deputy commander replies that the Lonia property is a fortress built to stop the wave of murders. Soldiers and prisoners are gathered to fight the zombies. Even doing all this, the deputy commander knows that he will have victims, so he asks the protagonist to go to Lonia's estate and perform the funerals there. Alan looks on as if he wants to refuse. The scene changes to some time later, when Alan arrives in Lonia and meets the head of the place. Jenad Lapong welcomes him, but it seems that the protagonist did not find the carriage so comfortable. Lapong greets Charlotte and grills, while Alan finds all this kind treatment for an exiled prince suspicious. He quickly calls the head of the place and asks to guide him. Lapong soon obeys. Lonia is located in the land of the spirits and was nicknamed the Sacrificial Fortress. The place gets this nickname because here the victims who sacrifice themselves to defeat the zombies gather. Something that also draws attention is the fortress wall, which was made to resist for a month against the zombies, until winter is over. At that moment the protagonist finds some prisoners and asks Harmon if they will fight on the front lines. The man confirms and tells the protagonist that he can simply help treat the injured men and perform the funerals. Alan replies that he can do this easily, but changes his mind when he hears Harmon say that there are at least 2,000 to 3,000 victims every year. He questions if there is anyone else to help, and the deputy commander says that there are about 80 priests who can perform the purification ritual. In addition, the soldiers will also help at funerals. At this point the protagonist calls Lord Lapong and the man asks if he can help. Alan yells that he needs drinks. The guy gets scared and the protagonist keeps saying that he can't handle this situation without drinking. He prefers to drink too much instead of working too much. The maids bring the drinks. The protagonist warns Grill and Charlotte that they can walk around, but they must return before the murder spree. The two agree. Finally Alan looks at Charlotte and says that it is important that she is here to protect him. After these words he runs to the room with the drinks and says that he will rest. Charlotte looks at the door and mentally says that she will protect him. The protagonist enters the room believing that it was a good performance. In fact he will not drink. The boy touches the bottle of wine and turns the drink into holy water. He ended up coming so fast that he forgot his bottles at home and had to replace them. Alan decides to fill all the bottles with holy water and lie to the men that it is just an energy drink. He also takes the opportunity to train the control of the force. At that moment something on the wall catches his attention and he walks there. Alan realizes that it is a weapon. He removes the gun that was hanging while saying that he did not imagine that there was something like this in this world. It's strange that people here prefer to use swords or knives instead of guns. The reason is that in this world weapons are just for show, plus this weapon uses mana and holy power instead of gunpowder. People also avoid using it because it has neither. Even trained mages can only shoot 5 times and it takes 5 minutes to produce a bullet with mana. This is why the weapon has become an old decoration item. Alan thinks this is a shame because he could easily take down the zombies. At this moment the protagonist opens the weapon loading box and pours some divine power. He is not sure if this is how he creates the bullets. It then points to the wall in front and pretends to be aiming at a zombie. Suddenly the gun fires a strong blue light. The system notifies that the user has successfully produced a holy power bullet. A big smile appears on Alan's face. On the other hand, the wall in front of him has been destroyed. The system warns that it is activating the divine energy. The protagonist is sorry for the mess he caused. Outside, some worried screams for the prince are heard. The next day, the deputy commander was in charge of the patrol. He has an angry expression on his face, and the soldiers comment among themselves that he doesn't seem to be in a good mood. Someone says he thinks it's because of the seventh prince. Suddenly Harmon yells for them to be quiet. He looks at the soldiers and asks with hatred if he will have to tell them again to keep their eyes on the prisoners instead of chatting. The soldiers run, saying that they are going to do it right now. Harmon is left alone and mentally says that in fact his bad mood is because of that prince. The man heard a loud noise yesterday and was prevented from entering the room by the protagonist, who claimed that he should not peek inside the room of a sensitive teenager. Harmon gets angry because he's sure he broke something. The guy is not entirely wrong. The deputy commander remembers that when he visited the village, the villagers reported that the protagonist had actually changed since the incident with the rope, even fought a group of zombies to save the villagers. Harmon is almost sure that the protagonist blackmailed the villagers into saying this. For him, it is impossible for someone like Alan to subdue a necromancer of Morgana's level. Then the deputy commander comes to the conclusion that it is most likely that Grill has subdued. He decides to write a letter of recommendation so that Grill can take the exam and become a holy knight. Suddenly a noise is heard and Harmon assumes that there is some fight going on between the prisoners. He rushes to check and shouts, asking what is happening before the big battle. At that moment the man's face is horrified to realize that they are not the prisoners. Alan, with a frightening expression, puts the shovel in a man's face and asks if he knows who he is dealing with. The scene changes to a few hours ago, when Alan was digging some graves for the employees who ended up passing away because of overwork. He used the bird bill mask that contained a purification spell to prevent infections. Until that moment no zombies had arrived on the property. Even so, the protagonist had already worked hard. Suddenly someone calls him. Three seemingly unpleasant guys tell Alan to rest for a while. The middle one is Heiss Hedron, the eldest son of Count Hedron. He thought that by the face the protagonist was a student at the academy, but Alan asks what academy he is talking about. Heiss is surprised and questions if the boy didn't come here to earn points in the school subjects. The blonde-haired guy thought the protagonist was one of those good family boys, but the black-haired guy next to him says that Alan is nothing but a redneck. The protagonist understands that these guys are after trouble. The black-haired one tells Alan that he better listen to Mr. Heiss if he wants to live a peaceful life here. Heiss says that the protagonist doesn't have to worry because he only came here because he is looking for a maid. At that moment the guy points to Charlotte and says that someone like her would do. Alan asks if he is talking about Charlotte and Heiss asks if she is his maid. The guy starts to say that he has already put his hands on more beautiful women in the gym. He continues talking about these experiences while the protagonist curses him. Mentally, Alan decides to go back to digging the ground because he didn't like the conversations of these crazy people. But the moment he turns his back he hears the guy call Charlotte. Alan stops and observes Heiss's steps. Suddenly the guy pulls Charlotte by the arm and says she can play with him. The girl denies, saying that she is busy, and Heiss asks if she can't understand what is happening. Charlotte quickly squeezes her hand with all her strength, and the guy screams in pain. Alan notices that at this rate she can break his arm. Charlotte lets go of the guy's hand and he starts to insult her, cursing in all ways. The protagonist obviously won't let it end like this. He tells Heiss that he knows exactly which family the guy comes from, but he doesn't care, because in this place anyone can become a zombie snack. At that moment the protagonist raises the shovel and goes down with everything next to the guy's body. Heiss is almost hit. Alan defends himself by saying that he missed the place where he was going to dig. The guy starts screaming that he tried to hit him on purpose. Heiss questions how he can call this a mistake. The next moment he gets punched precisely in the face. The protagonist defends himself by saying that his hand slipped. Heiss falls to the ground and Alan puts his foot on his chest. The guy is about to ask if the protagonist knows who he is, but Alan asks the same question, questioning if Heiss knows who he is. It was at that moment that the deputy commander arrived and ended the fight. Heiss says that the protagonist needs to be punished, but Charlotte enters the conversation and says that the prince just defended her. Harmon looks at Alan and says he can't just ignore it. At that moment the protagonist loses his patience and yells for everyone to be silent. Suddenly several blue chains trap the people in the place. They try to speak and no voice comes out. Harmon sees that Alan is using a sacred incantation. Suddenly the protagonist calls the deputy commander and demands that he tell this damn man who he is. Harmon is freed from the enchantment and turns to Heiss, then introduces the protagonist as Alan Alfals, grandson of the Holy Emperor. The enchantment is broken and Alan asks if the boy understands what he did. The protagonist makes it clear that he didn't like the way he treated Charlotte. Heiss starts to stutter and Alan says that there is no need to be afraid. He smiles and says that he will have no problem if the guy apologizes sincerely. In fact, there was a problem because the protagonist was arrested. He did not understand where his mistake was and Charlotte informed that according to the Lord Saint Knight, the injury inflicted on the son of a nobleman cannot be forgiven. Heiss fainted after the confusion and had to leave carried. Now the protagonist will be imprisoned for a week. Charlotte apologizes for this. Alan replies that it is not her fault and adds that he will take advantage of this time to read books. It is even better because he will not need to work. The scene changes to the deputy commander in the middle of a blizzard. The leader of the soldiers warns that the prisoners have been ordered to remove the snow, but it is snowing so much that it will not clear anytime soon. The biggest cause of the blizzard is because of Alan's enchantment. The deputy commander did not hear what the soldier said because he was lost remembering the moment when the protagonist used the enchantment on everyone. He just says that the prisoners must remove the snow so that the castle wall is at the ideal height. Harmon is surprised that so far there are few zombies even in such cold weather. He knows that the Holy Emperor eliminated the King of Spirits on December 25th. Maybe by then there won't be so many zombies. The soldier asks if he should report something to the Holy Emperor. Harmon replies that it is better to bring the prisoners inside the property again to buy time and regroup. The man obeys and the prisoners stop work. Suddenly a boot falls to the ground and red liquid pours over the white snow. A zombie with light skin and red eyes appears with the entire victim in its mouth. Someone shouts to close the gate immediately. The last prisoners arrive safely and report that they were attacked from behind by zombies. Because of the blizzard there was no way to realize that those things were hidden. The prisoner cries saying that his comrades who were behind were all defeated. The deputy commander quickly gave the orders to climb the outer wall and summon the soldiers for an emergency battle. He was caught off guard because everything was very quiet and from the beginning he thought that the spirits would only appear on December 25th, the day King Ammonius was eliminated, but it seems that they have advanced things. The priests are preparing to heal the wounded. Among them there are prisoners and soldiers. The deputy commander did not think that the zombies would attack from behind. He didn't imagine that those things could create strategy. Normally zombies don't know fear and trust only their instincts. All these years it was easy to deal with these monsters because they had no equipment or tactics. But looking at this year's zombies, it looks more like a perfectly coordinated army. The vice commander feels helpless watching those things approach the barrier. At that moment a voice echoes in his ear. A bizarre voice that says he loves that feeling of fear that he feeling. The zombies carry a giant throne with someone sitting on it. The voice continues to say that he is the judge of this world and will be the one to decide if they will continue to live or not. The voice is of the man who is being carried by the legion of zombies. He presents himself as the successor of Udai and the god of destruction. The monster was a zombie that evolved into a vampire. His abilities are insane and countless. The scene changes to the protagonist inside the prison. He keeps the book in his inventory while complaining that so far no one has brought his snack. Suddenly Lapong screams for him and says he will release him. The protagonist does not understand anything. The man opens the door and Alan says that he has not yet fully served his prison sentence. Lapong explains that it doesn't matter now. Right now there is a legion of monsters out there. Alan thinks it's strange because he thought he had enough workers. The man replies that the problem is that a vampire brought a legion of zombies. Alan asks if Lapong saw straight because it's almost unbelievable to think that a monster of such a high level would be here. The Lord says that he saw it with his own eyes and also heard his clearly human language. Now Vice Commander Harmond is fighting him. Lapong adds that he came to release him because the place could collapse, and he wants to make sure that the prince managed to evacuate to a safe place. Some screams are heard upstairs as the Lord asks the protagonist to leave. Alan asks what these screams are, and he says that it must be the Legion of Demons, so they need to escape through the back. At this moment several zombies are sent to the prison window. They hit the grate hard and fall into the room. Alan is open-mouthed by the attack. He didn't expect the vampire to catch so many zombies and throw at them. The protagonist realizes that the entry of these monsters here means that the territory has already been taken by them, so he yells for the Lord to get all the residents out of here. At this speed there will be many more victims than they thought. Lapong agrees to look for a place for the villagers to take refuge. Alan stays behind to deal with the zombies. These are superior in power than the others he has already fought. The protagonist manages to hold the door with the shovel and traps the zombies inside. The only option he finds now is to run away. 2. Since he cannot face this fight head-on, Alan uses the holy water to try to buy time. The zombies begin to melt and fall to the ground in pain. The protagonist takes the opportunity to flee. Outside he finds a scene of terror, a lot of red liquid scattered on the ground. The residents scream for help as they are attacked. The soldiers use their shields to ward off the zombies, but realize that they are surrounded. Alan stands still while everything happens. He feels a very strong anger in his heart and knows that he cannot stand still doing nothing, so the only option he finds is to pour holy water on everything. At that moment the protagonist pierces the ground with the shovel and the system appears. A gigantic wave appears around the boy and begins to spread in seconds. A cloud of holy water is also formed and it starts to rain. The zombies fall to the ground writhing in pain. The soldiers are surprised to see those things melting only with rainwater. In addition, their wounds are also healing. They understand that it is holy water, but they thought it was something sent by God. One of the soldiers says that this is actually the work of the prince. The villagers look confused and then the man points to the protagonist, who still has the shovel inserted in the earth while sending holy water to the zombies. The villagers are shocked to see an exiled prince who can still use his holy power. Someone shouts that this is expected of the grandson of the holy emperor who stopped the Spiritomon so many years ago. At that moment the residents are informed that the Lord has opened the basement of the mansion for everyone to flee, so the soldier asks him to follow them now. The residents thank the protagonist for his help and run outside. Alan turns purple from so much that he used his sacred power. He says that he only made it rain inside the castle, and even then he is exhausted. But he knows that he cannot stop, and so he calls the guards. Alan explains that it will be very difficult if they only use these spears to defend themselves, so the boy decides to put holy water on the tip of the spears. He says that it is the first once doing this and doesn't know how long it will last, but now the soldiers have a holy power buff on their weapons. The guy asks confused what a buff is and Alan says it means the weapons will work better. The protagonist adds that he is trusting them, then he yells for the men to go save his people. The gates open and the soldiers with enhanced weapons rush into battle. The first sword strike is enough to finish off the zombie. The men are happy to realize that just one touch is enough. Harmond calls their attention to focus on the battle. The soldiers are confident that they can now make it. This joy is short-lived because a man riding a fire horse appears. The soldiers realize that it is a Dullahan. A kind of red flame with black tentacles comes out of the Dullahan and delivers lethal blows. The soldier is sure he cannot defeat this monster. At that moment a weapon aims at the demon. The protagonist apologizes to everyone because this will be the second time he uses this item, and he has not yet become very familiar. After that Alan shoots. The vampire who leads the attack feels that his moment has come. His evolution into a vampire lasted 50 years. After that he began to control the zombies, thinking about creating a powerful legion. This is the opportunity he has waited for so many years. His evolution finally brought the return he needed, and he feels that he is the most powerful among his class. Vampires are classified according to the mana they have, but he was not recognized by the other vampires because he became one of them a short time ago. Anyway, he is still confident because he received the power he wanted so much, the skull of King Ammonius. It was thanks to this skull that the vampire managed to gather the mana necessary to control 20,000 demons. Now he is willing to be as good as Ammon. The vampire also believes that these holy knights are insignificant, but making them his zombie servants will be very rewarding. Meanwhile, the arrows continue to be fired from the top of the wall. Harmon screams not to stop. If something goes wrong there will be no escape. He understands that people's lives depend on him. The command of the place is in his hands. He feels pressured and thinks of some idea to save the village, but he knows that it is difficult. The only hope was if the Holy Emperor was here. Suddenly Charlotte approaches with several spears and says that the village is fine. The prince managed to get them out of here safely. Charlotte also warns that she won't let anything bad happen in the village where Alan is currently. Harmon looks at the girl not knowing what to say. She drops all the equipment on the ground and says that she brought it because he heard that he wanted to use the weapons on top of the wall. The deputy commander is surprised because he initially thought that Charlotte was just the maid, but she carried a series of weapons that no veteran soldier could carry. Her strength is absurd for a maid. This gives more confidence to the deputy commander to face this battle, so he says to himself that he will leave fortress and finish off that vampire. At that moment everyone realizes that the next attack is about to happen. Several zombies are thrown towards the castle wall. Harmon gets in front of Charlotte and says that it is too dangerous for her to be exposed. He removes the sword from the scabbard, which is also enhanced with holy water, but stops before attacking. Charlotte picks up forward momentum and jumps with the sword towards the zombies. She easily cuts them in half. Harmon puts her hand in front of her face, protecting herself from the remains. Charlotte lands gracefully on the other side of the wall. The deputy commander is left alone and realizes that the zombies that were cut by the girl's sword are unable to stand up. He believes that Charlotte aimed precisely at the head or imbued her weapon with holy power to destroy these things with one blow. While the man is standing there thinking, Charlotte walks past the walkers, hitting one by one in the neck. Harmon realizes that she is trying very hard because her techniques are sloppy. In addition, it is visible that the girl is using her physical strength to make up for the lack of training with swordsmanship, but all her steps seem familiar. Harmon notes that it is the imperial swordsmanship of the Holy Empire, the same one he trained when he was a soldier in the Holy Cross Squad. Harmon yells at Charlotte, asking where she learned this swordsmanship and if she is a member of the Holy Emperor's family. The girl replies that she is only a servant of the 7th prince and her swordsmanship is actually from a book she read and trained herself. After saying that, the girl went back to the zombies. Meanwhile, Harmon stood at the top of the wall without understanding anything she said. The scene changes to the resident's refuge. The soldier delivers some bottles of holy water for the priests to use when the sacred power is exhausted. Lapong asks where the man found it, and he replies that the protagonist gave it away. The lord is happy and asks where the prince went. The soldier says that he went to battle. Lapong is sad to hear this, but says that Alan has more confidence now with his new personality and holy power. Suddenly Lapong remembers something important and asks if there are any troops protecting inside the territory. At this moment inside the castle, swords and shields are scattered on the ground, accompanied by a huge trail of red liquid. Meanwhile, the zombies disguise themselves as soldiers and walk towards the top of the wall. The protagonist also tries to infiltrate and is recognized by a soldier. He presents his zombies disguised as reinforcement. The soldier says that the situation in front of the castle gate is more urgent now. Alan thinks this is perfect because down there no one has time to check their faces. The boy used the rest of the sacred power he had to control these soldiers. The protagonist initially thought about resurrecting the real soldiers, but he saw that it would be a lot of work and decided to just control the zombies that already existed. At that moment, the soldier in front of him thought he was a priest and asked if he shouldn't be healing people. Alan replied that he came here to test something and then showed the weapon. The soldier tries to explain that this type of ornament is useless, but the protagonist is concentrated and says that this place has the best view. The target can be seen perfectly. Alan aims at the precious part of all the men and shoots. He understands that this is the perfect opportunity to let the vampire experience Gaia's blessing. The scene changes to a few minutes ago. The deputy commander joined the rest of the squad because he heard that the evacuation of the territory was completed, so now he goes to help the team. Harmon is informed that the situation has not worsened thanks to some normal soldiers who used weapons full of holy power. He does not know how it happened, but the skills are comparable to those of the Holy Knights. There were also strange reinforcements that were next to them. The knight adds that now they need some idea to destroy the vampire. Harmon knocks down some zombies while asking how the long-distance attacks are. The knight says that the arrows continue to be sent. At that moment an arrow flew at full speed on the vampire's head, but the attack was blocked by a shield made of mana. The deputy commander realizes that it will be difficult for a weapon to pierce that mana shield. The soldier suggests breaking through the zombie legion directly, but Harmon knows it will be difficult, because they are already having difficulty blocking the zombie attacks. Suddenly someone screams, asking if that is a priest. The zombies begin to be knocked down one by one, and the knight asks Harmon if a priest can do this. The deputy commander looks towards the priest and sees a sphere of blue light around the person. He instantly realizes who it is. Meanwhile, the protagonist focuses on the spell and calls for Gaia, the goddess of love and mercy. Alan begs the goddess to grant her power for at least a few seconds, so that he can defeat the zombies and pierce the mana shield. the blue sphere transforms into a long-haired woman. She raises her hands and the power surrounds the weapon that the protagonist holds. The deputy commander sees everything happen before his eyes. He shouts happily that the image of the goddess has been manifested by the particles of light. At that moment the goddess stands behind the protagonist while sending her power to the weapon. Harmon shouts that this is definitely a blessing granted directly by the goddess Gaia. He is surprised because even for high-ranking priests, this is something impossible. It seems that the protagonist's disguise was so great that the deputy commander did not recognize him. But Charlotte recognized him even under those costumes. She happily says that she can recognize the light of His Highness. The man is reluctant to accept this, even because Alan blasphemed against Gaia when he eliminated those people in the church. So it doesn't make sense that he is receiving her blessing now. Meanwhile, Gaia's power is felt by everyone in the place. Harmon wonders if the protagonist has been forgiven. At that moment Alan aims between the vampire's legs and says that he hopes Gaia's blessing is with his future children. The shot shoots into the air and knocks down the zombies that are in the way. The bullet hits the shield accurately and begins to crack. The vampire sends more mana trying to save his protection, but it's no use and he gets hit between the legs. Before Alan came to Lonia, he studied a book on the method of collecting holy power. That's when the boy realized that while wizards use spells and mana, priests use prayers and holy power, necromancers use life expectancy and magic power. The real Alan had to give up life expectancy and magic power in exchange for being a necromancer. But the protagonist used the fact that he was the grandson of the Holy Emperor to test his own sacred power, so he exchanged necromancy for the prayers of the priests. That's how his prayer worked, and he managed to contact the goddess Gaia. At that moment the vampire screams in pain and demands that his legion return. Now he wants to retreat. The protagonist realizes that the shot was not fatal, but at least the shield was destroyed. The knights shout for everyone to attack while the army is retreating. Alan comes down from the wall and goes to his zombies in disguise. He tells the other soldiers that he needs to take his men to take care of the wounded. After that the protagonist runs with his zombies into the castle. The soldiers stand down there without understanding anything because they are still shocked by the apparition of the goddess Gaia. They all breathed a sigh of relief and commented that it is good to have such a high-ranking priest among them, though the deputy commander still had doubts if that was really Alan. After all, the boy was nothing more than a useless man who deserved to be exiled. But now something seems to have changed. In addition, there is still Charlotte, a super-skilled girl who is proud to serve the 7th prince. The deputy commander does not know how this could have happened and remembers the villagers saying that His Highness has changed. The man is almost convinced that that boy has really changed, probably after losing his memories. The vice commander still doesn't understand how Alan forgot what happened 5 years ago and came back with the personality he had before, that personality he had before the passing of His Highness Elisha. Elisha is the mother of the 7th Prince Alan, a country girl of common origin. She belonged to the mixed race of the Holy Nation and the Southern Nation, called Aslan. Because of this she was frowned upon by many nobles and even the current emperor, but the son of the Holy Emperor loved her and they married. A while later they gave birth to the first prince. It was then that the royal family chose 2 noblewomen as concubines of the son of the Holy Emperor, and they had many children. The Holy Emperor continued to love only Elisha, and after that she gave birth to the 7th prince. Alan was very happy and kind, but when she turned 10 her mother passed away. Elisha was attacked by a vampire during a night walk with her 2 children, the first prince and the 7th prince. Elisha passed away trying to protect Alan. The first prince survived and received a curse on his heart. After that incident Alan became someone else. People even said that the 7th prince had gone crazy. The deputy commander's theory is that Alan regained his original personality because he lost his memory after trying to eliminate himself, but that still doesn't explain his strong sacred power to summon the goddess Gaia. Harmon finds it strange that the boy hides this power from everyone. Maybe it's because Alan doesn't want to attract the attention of the Holy Emperor's family because he's planning a rematch. It makes sense to honor his mother's name. No one from the imperial palace liked her and her children. The nobles insulted her daily, and she had this end. If Alan wants to destroy these nobles and the vampire, it would explain the reason for hiding his power. This theory is the most accepted by Harmon because he remembers that Alan acted in an undisciplined way before him because he was a holy knight. It would also explain Charlotte's incredible abilities. Deep down Harmon also feels guilty for what happened to Elisha. He made his guard on the day of the attack. The first prince ordered Harmon to go for support and he obeyed, leaving Elisha alone with the children for a few minutes. The vice commander could never forgive himself for not having protected his highness, so he decides that he will help the protagonist in whatever it takes, in case he wants revenge in the name of his highness. But the first step is to return Lonia's safety. The man was so attached to his theory that he didn't even realize that night had come. He returned to the castle and was frightened by the appearance of a soldier. Harmon finds it strange because he has never seen a guard patrol without a torch during the night. He soon realizes that this soldier is actually a zombie and attacks with the sword, but the blow is easily blocked. Harmon looks surprised and then dodges some arrows. At that moment, the zombies disguised as soldiers begin to leave the castle. The deputy commander continues to attack and notices that these zombies seem much stronger, but can still be defeated. At that moment, Harmon aims the sword at the zombie's head and tries to hit him. At the last second, someone yells for him to stop. The deputy commander obeys and realizes that all the zombies have become immobile. He hears some footsteps and asks what is happening. The protagonist just orders Harmon to put down his weapon. The two walk together and the protagonist questions how the troops are doing. He reminds him that the Legion will return soon. After midnight is the day of the passing of the spirit Amon, so the guards need to be ready. Harmon notices that the protagonist controlled those zombies and asks if he's using necromancy. Alan tries to make some excuses because he didn't want his plan to be discovered. The deputy commander asks scared if he's so depressed that he had to use necromancy. Alan doesn't understand what he's talking about, but confesses that he is really controlling the zombies. The protagonist explains that he can't remember how he deals so easily with necromancy, but decided to use it to help them in battle. The protagonist gave this excuse about memory loss because he knows that no one would believe him if he said he transmigrated. The deputy commander tries to say that Alan knows how to use necromancy because he made a deal with the demon. Alan replies that he doesn't remember this. When he realized he already knew how to deal with necromancy, the vice commander is silent and the protagonist asks if he will tell the inquisitors about it. Harmon replies that he should and Alan begins to say that he is screwed. He already begins to think about how Charlotte would do to save him. His thoughts are interrupted when Harmon falls to his knees in front of him. He bows to the protagonist and says that he will keep his secret. Alan is surprised by this action, while the deputy commander says that he will help him until the end. The boy doesn't understand why the knight who initially didn't like him is doing this. It seems very suspicious. The protagonist thinks the guy might want to use him for something, but that doesn't make sense because he has nothing to offer. So Alan comes to the conclusion that the deputy commander just wants to monitor his actions. Harmon replies that it's not that and is about to remind him of his mother's incident, but the protagonist interrupted him, warning that they need to focus on the next attack. At that moment, the moon turns red and Alan says it's time. He looks at Harmon and wishes him a Merry Christmas. The zombies head to the castle wall, and the protagonist adds a Happy Halloween as a bonus. Harmon wasn't very happy with these commemorative dates together. Meanwhile, the vampire orders his monsters to eat the living to evolve. He promises to ensure that everyone becomes kings too. At that moment, the vampire fills his mouth and spits out a pink power with tentacles. Meanwhile, Lapong helps the front line. Hayes was forced to fight and tried to escape the battle, claiming that the part of his face that was hit by the prince was still hurting a lot. His complaint was not taken into account. The Lord is focused on the amount of monsters ahead. The power of the zombies is clearly incomparable, and this discourages the soldiers. Suddenly some whispers are heard about the high-ranking priest who will save them. The protagonist walks through the soldiers, stealing everyone's attention. In the next moment, he calls for Gaia and asks that his power be shared with his soldiers to defeat evil. The request is granted, and the power spreads to everyone. The system notifies that the skill has been activated. Weapons are enhanced before the eyes of the soldiers. Lapong opens a smile, saying that the goddess is with them. The men become confident and the attack begins. The zombies become weak next to the holy power. The deputy commander directly asks Gaia for some of her power and her gun. The next moment, the man jumps to strike the enemies. He makes a zombie combo. Harmon's strategy is to make the soldiers' fighting spirit increase. This works and is the perfect opportunity to attack the target. On the other hand, the vampire is angry with the protagonist for blocking his path with those useless soldiers. Harmon runs towards the vampire, but the demon is not willing to give in easily and jumps at the moment of attack. He lands on the ground and directs Amon's skull to the protagonist. Harmon yells for everyone to attack now, but the soldiers stop when he realizes that something is wrong. The vampire puts Amon's skull on his head and his body is transformed. He grabs the soldiers with his hands and crushes it. The protagonist imagined that the vampire would do it and that he would be the next victim. So Alan starts to flee as the demon sees his movement because of the holy power. The protagonist's goal is to use the wall of the territory as a shield before the vampire's power arrives. He doesn't have time because in that second a stone was thrown in his direction. Alan narrowly dodges. The demon laughs at his attempt to escape and says that the boy will get what he owes. The vampire opens his mouth about to launch a destructive power. The protagonist screams that it's time for Plan C. Charlotte jumps carrying a huge stone. The demon spits the power towards the protagonist. At the last moment, Charlotte manages to use the stone as a shield. Alan breathes a sigh of relief that the girl arrived in time and says that she is really trustworthy, but something arouses his concern. The shield is starting to break with the force of power. In addition, Charlotte still doesn't know how to control her own power. If they stay here, they will be consumed by the monster's attack. Suddenly someone jumps towards Charlotte. Grill joins the boys to hold the shield wall. Charlotte worries about her adoptive father and he says he will do anything for his daughter. The shield begins to be destroyed. Alan tries one last attempt to get out alive and stands behind the two sending holy power. He confesses that he knows how to use it correctly, but he thinks that this wall can also be strengthened with divine energy just like the wall of his room. So he calls for Gaia again and asks for protection. The enemy is wide-eyed listening to the prayer. Alan doesn't know what else to ask for in prayer and shouts for Gaia to do something. Suddenly the image of a blue shield appears. The demon is caught off guard and is suddenly hit by the hologram. The power is so strong that an explosion happens, a crater opens in the ground and the stones fly everywhere. Charlotte is in the dust while trying to find the protagonist. As soon as the dust dissipates, a body can be seen. She runs to the grill and the protagonist holds her shoulder, saying that everything is fine and that the man has just passed out. Charlotte asks how the prince is doing and he replies that he is fine, but the fight is not over yet. Gaia's sacred power is still consuming the demon's body, but the skull is no longer there. Charlotte says that the protagonist is too weak and should not fight again. He replies that he knows and even his holy water has run out. When he said that it is not over yet, it means that they have a chance to retreat. Charlotte begins to carry her father while the protagonist leads the way. At that moment, a purple flame catches his attention. He turns around and finds a skull. Alan remembers that during the fight he realized that the mana was not accumulating around the vampire, but somewhere else. Charlotte quickly catches his attention and he says he needs to check something first. Alan takes the skull in his hand and quickly recognizes that it was the one the vampire wore around his neck, then calls the system and asks what the function of this thing is. The system informs that this is the skull of the Necromancer King Ammonius. On the first use, the user's magic power will be amplified by 20% and the recovery level will be increased by 10%. All effects of magic-related skills are increased by 10%. While Alan checks the system window, the vampire starts screaming that he has to get that damn priest and recover as soon as possible. He touches his face and realizes that he is without Amon's skull, but soon sees the protagonist with his item in hand and runs to get it back. Alan finally reads all the information in the system and knows what he should do. He places Ammonius' skull on his head and several flaps appear, notifying the temporary strengthening of the equipment. The protagonist turns to the vampire and says that now the Legion belongs to the heir of Gaia's legacy. Chains fly towards the demon and trap its members in the air. The Holy Knights descend the demon to the ground. Gaia's power affects all zombies. They calmly walk to the source of the voice. The vampire is accused of breaking the rules of this world of his own volition. Now Alan commands all the demons in the place. The vampire begins to scream that this is not fair and that it was the protagonist who broke the rules. He does not accept that the power belongs to an incapable human. Alan puts the gun to his head while saying that he also does not know what happened, but he is happy. The protagonist performs the prayer in the name of the priest and the sacred power, finally wishes the vampire a Merry Christmas with a smile on his face and shoots. The bullet fires like an explosion in the enemy's face. The damage occurs in half of his head, and he falls to the ground. Charlotte looks at Alan. Meanwhile, Gaia's power remains linked to the zombies. They are destroyed one by one and disappear. The soldiers celebrate as the snow falls. The deputy commander goes to Charlotte and Grill. Some time later, the Holy Emperor arrives in Lonia and doesn't see any zombies. He asks if he arrived late. The old man felt the presence of Amon. The knight informs that he heard that it was a vampire who controlled 20,000 demons. The emperor says that vampires are not that strong, but it is still strange. The atmosphere of the place seems that there was a huge conflict of holy power and magical power. This means that the vampire had a lot of magical power. Now he is curious to know who is the person who could block this power. The knight says that it must be someone who is dedicated to becoming a saint. The emperor replies that it is likely. It is good that there are more saints and priests, because as time goes by these vampires will begin to sneak into humans. It will be much easier if there is someone to send them back to hell. The knight comments that the sacred power of God is not awakened throughout the world. This is the reason why priests and saints are not common. The emperor replies that he knows this very well. He just thinks it would be good to have such a powerful priest in the royal empire. After that, the emperor says he will return home and orders his men to send priests and healers to take care of the villagers. At that moment, one of the knights tells the emperor that Alan is on the property and asks if he doesn't want to meet him. Suddenly a murderous aura emanates from the old man, and he angrily asks why he should meet the seventh prince. The men hurry to carry out orders before they lose their minds. The emperor takes a deep breath and says that there is no need to see the child who dishonored his own mother. He definitely doesn't want to see that damn grandson. That's 105-year-old Celt Alphals. The Holy Emperor is sure the brat cried during the battle. The scene changes to the Imperial Palace. Harmon reports to the Holy Emperor and warns that the protagonist was responsible for the destruction of the vampire. The Holy Emperor shouted in surprise. The nobles whisper that this is unbelievable, and that this is the most bizarre nonsense they have heard in recent years. The Holy Emperor asks Harmon if he is sure he is talking about Alan Alphals. The deputy commander confirms that the protagonist eliminated the vampire. The Holy Emperor angrily says that he never thought of seeing Harmon lie, but now it seems that he will have to end his life. The Archbishop interrupts the conversation and asks the Holy Emperor to calm down, then tells Harmon that what he just said is an impossible thing to happen. This is the 100-year-old Archbishop Raphael Astoria. The poor deputy commander listened to all the barbarities that the nobles had to say about the protagonist. He understands people being suspicious because of the boy's old personality. So he apologizes to His Majesty and says that he only came to report what he saw with his own eyes. The Archbishop comments that he also heard the residents of Lonia defending the seventh prince. Some even called him a priest. The Archbishop suggests investigating him because the boy may be related to the strange energy that the Holy Emperor felt last time. The old man seriously asks if the Archbishop believes he can be that brat. Raphael only replies that he is trying to prevent the protagonist from stealing someone else's credits. The Holy Emperor turns his attention to Harmon and says that he is still not sure if he is telling the truth, but everyone should be given credit for protecting Lonia's territory. Thinking about it, the Holy Emperor divides part of Lonia's territory and gives it to the deputy commander as a thank you. In addition, he also promises that he will shorten the protagonist's exile time. Finally, the Holy Emperor says that the deputy commander must bring the seventh prince to the Imperial Palace when he has fully recovered. A little later, Harmon knocks on the door and says that he has returned from the mission. The person on the other side tells him to come in. The vice commander clears the dark room with a candle. At that moment we see a very injured person in bed. This is the protagonist's brother, the first prince named Luan Alphals. He comments that that curse is consuming him entirely. His vision and hearing are getting worse now, so he asks Harmon to come closer. Luan says he heard what happened on the battlefield. At that moment the deputy commander approaches to hear better and is suddenly pulled by the collar by Luan. He screams, asking if Harmon protected the seventh prince, the trash that stained his mother's name. Luan pulls the vice commander close to his face and questions if he is in his right mind. The boy is totally out of his mind and thinks that the knight has decided to betray him now because he won't last much longer. So he decided to ally himself with his useless brother. Luan also shouted that Harmon chose the wrong side because the protagonist will never succeed to the throne. The vice commander only asks him to be calm because he is already pouring red liquid everywhere. Luan finally comes to his senses and apologizes to Harmon. He says he knows the deputy commander would never do that. Harmon's clothes get stained and he reassures him that everything is fine, but makes it clear that neither Luan nor the seventh prince are guilty. Harmon takes the blame for Ulysses' death because he shouldn't have left his position. Luan replies that the deputy commander did it right. No one would have made it out alive if the troops hadn't arrived in time. At that moment Harmon asks the first prince if he hates his brother and the guy replies yes. Luan says that Alan brought shame and acted carelessly. The seventh prince deliberately labeled himself a scoundrel and hid his true intentions. That's why he was exiled. Harmon thinks a little about everything he heard. Luan asks how he is after the battle and suggests that the man go rest a little. Harmon replies that he can't rest now because he has to follow the emperor's orders. He will have to return to the Lonia estate soon. Luan feigns surprise, but then he tells himself that it looks like that useless prince will have to come home. 3 weeks have passed since the murder spree. Grill complains that he can't stand working anymore and has back pain. To make matters worse, he has no pay. At first he thought about leaving and gave up when he realized that Charlotte didn't want to go. At that moment Grill's attention is diverted to a box of clothes. He approaches her and realizes that she belonged to the zombies. Grill's eyes shine because he knows that these pieces no longer have an owner. The guy looks around to make sure no one is looking and then moves the accessories inside the box. A red necklace catches his attention. Grill is convinced that he will have no problem taking these things because he worked hard without any remuneration. Suddenly his eyes land on a piece of paper that is intact. Grill looks at the stamp and is sure it will cost a lot of money. Meanwhile, inside the protagonist's room, Charlotte asks if she needs to bring anything else and he says no. This food is enough and it was the best he has tasted in all these years. Charlotte replies that the doctor recommended that the boy eat as much as he could because he woke up after 3 weeks passed out, then the food will serve to increase his resistance. The protagonist remembers that the doctor said that waking up would already be a miracle. The priest explained that Alan had a severe depletion of sacred power, enough to leave someone incapacitated, so it is a miracle that he survived. After that, Charlotte was responsible for the care and pass tape all over Alan's body. The protagonist even comments that he is feeling like a zombie. The priest adjusts his glasses and says that it is more likely that the person next to him is a zombie, referring to Charlotte. The protagonist gets a little lost in the subject and asks what he meant. The man replies that he also treated Charlotte while Alan was passed out. The protagonist asks what the problem is and the doctor explains that his holy power and mana were very strong. In general cases, people who are close to this power can become incapacitated or even die, but perhaps Charlotte's body has evolved. The priest remembers the case that happened to Her Majesty 50 years ago. He lost the first fight he had with Amon and was unconscious for a long time. His body was damaged due to the shock of the Necromancer's holy power and mana. It is rumored that doctors had to recreate Her Majesty's body again and again, which is why his body evolved beyond human limitations. After that, His Majesty recovered and defeated the Necromancer Ammonius. He assumes that this is also the case with Charlotte. The protagonist looks at the girl suspiciously. The system presents Charlotte as a 16-year-old girl with a superhuman body. She has no aura of evil. Charlotte asks why the protagonist is looking like this, and he can only think that people like her should be heroes, instead of people with a skinny body like him. Alan tries to change the subject a little and asks her to go get some books. The girl obeys and he keeps thinking that fortunately he managed to keep Amon's skull in the inventory, despite the powerful effect ending his body. Charlotte comes back with the books. The first is about the theory of magic of the Holy Emperor, sacred power and rebirth, and the study of resurrection. All were written by Archbishop Raphael Astoria. The protagonist begins to study and the first book already has a dedication to the goddess Gaia. He wanted to take a break from this story of the goddess, but he knows that it is necessary to learn quickly how to control her sacred power and use zombies effectively. At that moment, the protagonist's studies are interrupted by a knock on the door. Harmond enters and says he is happy to see him awake. Alan is surprised that the deputy commander has returned so quickly from the Imperial Palace. He reports that he came because he has something very important to tell the prince. The protagonist deludes himself into thinking that the man has come to bring some reward like the last time he captured Morgana. His eyes even shine waiting for the reward, but the deputy commander is direct and says that he brought orders from Her Majesty. The protagonist must return to the Imperial Palace immediately. The boy's mood changed in moments. Harmond was kicked out of the room and tried to explain that it was important for the protagonist to return with him. Charlotte says she thinks there's someone calling and Alan replies that it's better to ignore it. The girl is surprised and asks if he does not want to return to the palace. The protagonist replies that he does not want to return to such a dangerous place, mainly because he does not know who was behind Morgana wanting to harm him. Charlotte is thoughtful with the word dangerous, and the protagonist says that she just needs to ignore the screams of the deputy commander. At first Alan thought he just needed to ignore it, but after that day Harmon's requests continued without interruption. He appeared at the window and even left small notes at the meal. Alan couldn't take it anymore. Charlotte left the room and told the deputy commander that she had a message from the prince. Harmon gets excited and asks what it is. Suddenly Charlotte's face darkens and she tells the man to get lost before she throws salt on him. The deputy commander changes the subject and asks if she is going home now. The girl replies that she is going to a lodging near here. Harmond offers to accompany her because it is too late and Charlotte tries to refuse, but the man confesses that he wants to know why the protagonist refuses to return to the Imperial Palace. Charlotte then accepts his company and reveals that the prince finds that place dangerous. Harmond does not understand why the boy is afraid, but it is expected since the relationship with his brothers is not good, and his position in the palace is also not very comfortable. Charlotte is silent throughout on the way to her lodgings. Grill soon meets her and waves, but complains about the delay. The deputy commander recognizes the man and asks if he is not the same as the case of the witch Morgana. Grill replies embarrassed that he is always ready to help people, then tries to evade the subject by saying that he is going to sleep. But Harmond is interested in the subject, and asks the man to explain how the battle was against such a strong necromancer. Charlotte enters the lodge while leaving her father talking to the man. Suddenly her attention is drawn to something on the table. She takes that paper that her father rescued and asks what is this document that she has never seen before. Grill makes up some excuses saying that this paper belongs to him. Harmond comments that the document it looks old and Grill starts to tremble. He explains that it is because he has had the paper for a long time. But the deputy commander is not mistaken because he recognizes the seal of the Herreys family on the document. The Herreys family became known for defending the northern region of Lonia 50 years ago, but the entire family was annihilated in the deadly battle against the necromancer Ammonius, all out of loyalty to the Holy Emperor. So the deputy commander wonders why the document of the bravest family in this land is here. The next moment the man says he understood everything. He thinks that Grill and Charlotte are the survivors of the Herreys family. His theory starts to make sense in his head when the man remembers the strength he saw Charlotte and Grill use during the battle. This also explains why the two are so careful with the prince. On the other hand, Charlotte mentally scolds her father for bringing all this mess into the house. Harmond ends up committing a misunderstanding and says he will keep everything a secret. Grill and Charlotte don't understand anything. But the deputy commander keeps talking and asks Grill for permission to refine her daughter's skills. This is good since she intends to stay by the protagonist's side for a long time. So he suggests writing a letter of recommendation from a holy knight. Grill asks surprised if Charlotte can enter the Imperial Palace and Harmond confirms that yes, she can even become a noblewoman. In addition, if she wants she can learn the swordsmanship of the Holy Empire. Charlotte's eyes shine when she hears that she can help the protagonist even more. At the same moment she says that she wants to do it, but only if he really goes to take the prince's side. Harmond replies that he also wants to protect Alan. He promises himself that from today on he will protect the Herreys family and the prince. The next day the deputy commander has a surprise. The protagonist says he will go with him to the Imperial Palace. Harmond wastes no time and puts the boy in the carriage. During the way he asks why the prince changed his mind. Alan asks if he thinks he changed his mind quickly, and the guy replies that until yesterday the prince didn't want to go. Alan remembers that he spent the last few days studying and decides to be honest. He tells the deputy commander that he decided to go because in the palace he has all the books he needs. Harmond praises his interest in studies. The protagonist says he knows he will receive bad looks in the palace, and that's why he already intends to lock himself in the library. The deputy commander cannot deny that this will happen, but still asks Alan to relax because it's been a long time since he was last in the city of Laurensis, so he's sure he'll find plenty of things he can enjoy here. A few minutes later Charlotte and Alan are impressed by the city. The girl comments that there are many people here and Harmond replies that it is because it is the capital, then asks if the protagonist likes this place. But Alan replies without emotion that it stinks. The boy even covers his nose with the cloth and asks if there are any zombies in the capital. Suddenly he feels the presence of something stronger and starts running among people, bumping into some passers-by. The vendors keep presenting their products and the noise increases more and more. The protagonist keeps looking for some zombie, but the smell is much worse than a zombie, and he fears that there is some vampire among the passers-by of the capital. Charlotte and Harmond finally catch up with the boy's footsteps and ask if he found anything. Alan is paralyzed looking ahead while the deputy commander continues to call for him. At that moment everyone notices a head surrounded by flowers on top of a box. Three are attentive waiting for something to happen. Suddenly that head begins to open its eyes and screams. The scream is so strong that Charlotte covers her ears. In the same second the protagonist removes the sword from its scabbard and cuts the head in half. Charlotte asks if this is a zombie. Alan looks up while saying that he has never witnessed anything like this in person. The remaining body of the zombie was hanging from some nearby wires. The protagonist is not sure if the body and head belong to the same zombie. He is taken out of his thoughts when a voice starts to say that he is being followed. Alan turns towards the voice, Charlotte, and the deputy commander also hears someone saying that this thing is a red-haired middle-aged man. He met this end after trying to observe them. The voice disappears in an instant and Harmon says that it will be difficult to track them, so he will report what happened when he arrives at the Imperial Palace. The protagonist is stressed because he just wanted to study, but feels a sense of danger. Lorensis was a peaceful city, but now it is in a chaotic state and cases of murders like this happen daily. Both the city has become chaotic because of these crimes, and the Imperial Palace is chaotic with the return of the 7th Prince. At that moment the protagonist entered the palace and was already apprehended by the deputy commander, who ordered him to keep quiet about the case he saw earlier. Alan yells that he understands and doesn't need to keep repeating it all the time. Harmon replies that he is repeating it several times because in the end he is still a child. The protagonist cannot refute this fact because he is still 16 years old. Then the man tells Charlotte that if anyone asks who she is associated with, suffice it to say that it came with the vice commander of the Holy Knights. The girl agrees and the protagonist says he will lock himself in the library. The vice commander informs him of the path he has to take to get to the library, while Charlotte shouts that he will keep him company after finishing the watch. These precautions make the protagonist really feel like a child. Alan separates from the group and goes towards the library, but something still doesn't seem right and he continues to smell the zombie. It is likely that a vampire has entered the palace, but he decides to follow what Harmon said about staying quiet and keeping his attention on the threat. The truth is that the protagonist considers fleeing this place after finding the magical book he is looking for. Then he heads towards the library, but feels that he is walking in circles. At that moment the protagonist's attention is directed to the statue of a woman. He approaches and reads some inscriptions where it says that the woman's name is Ulysses. Alan realizes that this woman must have passed away a long time ago due to what is written. Suddenly very close to him an old man complains of back pain. He also says that he hates doing all this work alone. The gardener gets so angry that he says it would be better to cut the neck of all this garbage and use them as decoration. The protagonist hides behind the statue and starts to observe the man who emanates a murderous aura. The gardener continues to complain about the laziness of his helpers. Suddenly the guy turns to Alan and says that he should have gone there. The protagonist tries to explain that he is not a gardener, but changes his mind because he wants to decorate this statue with beautiful flowers. Shortly after the protagonist gets tired of carrying a bag of dirt, he comes to the conclusion that he should have worn the new clothes that Harmon gave him. At that moment the man looks at the protagonist's face and drops all the gardening items on the ground. Alan asks what happened and comments that the gardener is quite dirty. Then he hands him a handkerchief to clean himself and advises him not to work alone because if he gets sick he won't have help. Suddenly the gardener holds Alan by the arm with all his strength while he asks to let him go. The man comments that he heard that he lost his memories and his personality also changed. It seems that people were right. The protagonist doesn't understand anything this guy is talking about. The man comes closer and asks if he can't recognize his grandfather. The meeting is not so happy for Alan because he was forced into the Imperial room. The protagonist is angry with himself for not recognizing the Holy Emperor. He thought he was just an ordinary gardener. At that moment the Holy Emperor tells the protagonist, who heard that he played an active role in Lonia's estate. Alan confirms and the man questions if he was the one who eliminated the vampire. The protagonist thinks about what he should answer. He remembers that even the citizens of Lorensis are aware of the recent incidents in the capital, so there is no way the Sacred Empire does not know that there is a vampire behind this incident. That's why the protagonist comes to the conclusion that the Holy Emperor doesn't want to reward the person who saved the territory of Lonia. In fact, he wants to find someone who can save the capital from vampires. Alan then confirms to His Majesty that he was the one who eliminated the vampire. The nobles around were all surprised because they disbelieved from the beginning that the boy did something. Alan is sincere in revealing that he was able to catch that vampire because he had the help of Harmon, Charlotte, Lord Lapong and Grill. In addition, he also received great help from the citizens of Lonia's estate. The protagonist decided to distribute the credits to prevent problematic things from happening. The Holy Emperor says he understood, but Alan realizes that the old man seems a little bothered. The Holy Emperor says that he must rest now. The protagonist wishes him good luck in hunting vampires. The man widens his eyes in surprise and Alan runs from there so as not to have any danger of being asked for something from him. The Holy Emperor wonders if this boy heard about vampires because of the deputy commander. He also notices that Alan changed his ways radically because until last year he was causing problems in the palace. Maybe the memory loss positively affected his behavior. At that moment the man remembers the other two people that the protagonist mentioned. Grill and Charlotte were the names that came to him about being from the Herrey's family. It seems that the vice commander's misunderstanding reached royalty. The man believes that this group can rid the capital of vampires. Lord Lapin's report also cites the seventh prince as savior of the soldiers. He used holy power to heal the wounded, but there is also a story that the blessing of the goddess Gaia descended after he prayed. As if it wasn't enough, Alan also shot the vampire with a decorative weapon. This was the report that Lapong wrote, putting all the most important information and sent to the Holy Emperor. At that moment one of the nobles says that he is sure that the protagonist is lying. The red-haired man explains that the person who saved the property of Lonia was fully hooded, so they just assumed that it was the seventh prince. Maybe they confused it with Alan, and that's why they gave him the credits. The Holy Emperor feels a headache just thinking that he will have to participate in this discussion. It turns out that the man is about to leave the throne and needs a successor, but he has no one with the ability to succeed the empire. Elisha was the only person capable of doing it, but she left and the Holy Emperor thought of Luan to succeed the throne, but the guy was also hit in the attack and is unable to leave his own room. That's why now his eyes are on the protagonist. While the old man thinks, the argument continues in the main hall. He then gets stressed and shouts for everyone to be silent. The nobles obey. A guy approaches and asks His Highness to calm down. This man is Count Pomer, an acquaintance of Luan. He warns that the anniversary of Lady Elisha's death will be in 2 months, and it will be good if the seventh prince is still in the palace. In addition, Pomer argues that the protagonist should not be attacked since he took care of the vampires. The Holy Emperor takes a deep breath and agrees with him. After nightfall, Alan finally finds the library. As soon as he enters, someone asks if he is the seventh prince. The protagonist regrets having entered before checking if there was still anyone in the library. The blonde girl apologizes and says she is leaving, but he replies that she can stay since he arrived first. The protagonist notes that the girl looks uncomfortable. Suddenly, when he looks closer, he has a quick memory of the owner of the original body. This was the girl that the real Alan declared himself and was rejected. After that he put the rope around his neck and left this world. Both are embarrassed and look in the opposite direction. The system informs that this is 17-year-old Alice Astoria, granddaughter of Archbishop Raphael. The protagonist finally understands why the girl looks uncomfortable. She must think that Alan has come back to ask her out on a date. The protagonist also realizes that Alice's last name is the same as Archbishop Raphael Astoria's, the name of the author of the book he is looking for. A new memory arises in the protagonist's head, where it shows that the real Alan painted the Archbishop's room with some insults, accusing the man of being Gaia's servant. The protagonist is embarrassed because he wanted to meet the author of the book in person. He tries to improve the mood and apologizes to Alice for appearing out of nowhere. It turns out that he lost his memory and still doesn't remember most of the people in the palace. The girl doesn't answer anything. Then Alan hurries to nail the book and get out of here as soon as possible, but finds the place of the empty book. Alice kindly asks if he is looking for his grandfather's books, then corrects himself by asking if he is after the Archbishop's book. The protagonist confirms that he is, and then the girl replies that she borrowed it to read, but you can deliver it if he needs it. Alan refuses because he didn't want to disturb the girl, but Alice insists and delivers the book about the resurrection. She warns that it is impossible to resurrect someone. The book is nothing more than a record of his grandfather's research. Alan is surprised and asks why the resurrection is impossible. Alice says that no matter how great the sacred power is, it is impossible to capture a soul that has already left the body. Necromancy can capture souls, but it cannot resurrect them. In addition to being a necromancer, you have to donate a few years of life to the demon. This means that resurrection is impossible even for those who receive Gaia's blessing. Alan questions if someone who has holy power and magical power can attempt resurrection. This question surprises the girl and she replies that it is extremely rare for people to have both, but if they use their powers at the same time their body will simply explode. The protagonist replies that he understands and confesses that he still thinks that resurrection is not impossible. Raphael's book says that it is enough to pray more to improve his sacred power. Now Alan is in doubt about which way to go to get more sacred power. Alice replies that he can use the magic tool for this, but she still does not think that resurrection can happen. Alan soon tries to divert the subject and says that it is getting late, then she must leave. Alice replies that she can stay a little longer and begins to be pushed out of the library. The girl is expelled and the protagonist says goodnight. Alice was angry because she wanted to talk a little more about the resurrection. She remembers that the last meeting she had with him was not so pleasant, but this time the 7th prince looks very different. Suddenly a voice asks what she is doing here. Alice realizes that it is her grandfather and replies that she has come to return some books to the library. The man quickly advises her not to go out alone because the 7th prince is back.